The Edmonton Oilers have had goaltending steal games for them this season. It's come from both goaltenders. Both Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen have stood on their heads. Whether it's the Dallas Stars, Mikko Koskinen's had their number in Dallas. Mike Smith has played great games against the Boston Bruins. He played well in a loss, for example. There are a number of games in which you could say either goaltender played really well. What is that? Where is that coming from?
Well, I think Mike Smith's best game or steal was probably in Pittsburgh, where they got in an afternoon game and he had over 50 shots and the Oilers won the game. I always come back to what Glenn Hall said: nobody forces goalies to become goalies. When you're 12, you don't have to become a goalie, and if you want to become a goalie, then part of being the goalie is that you steal some games. And if you're not in the National Hockey League, unless you can steal games. If all you make is the saves you're supposed to make, you're probably in the American League or over in Europe. NHL goalies make saves they shouldn't, and that's why the Oilers have won a couple of games this year. 3 or 4 times, certainly, the goalie has won them games. And in Koskinen's case, both times 2-1 in Dallas, where the Oilers were outplayed quite badly and they won the game. I can't think of too many games this year where the Oilers goaltenders were awful and they lost the Oilers the game because they were bad. It's not like previous years where they were giving up shots, goals in the first shot of the game and down 1-0 after a minute or 2 or such like that. That hasn't happened a whole lot this year. So the Oilers are keeping them in the games, the goalies in the first period, and then as the game wears on, the Oilers usually come on. So, so far it's been a very democratic situation where Smith and Koskinen have played about the same number of games, and they both won about the same number of games. Smith's been better for the last 2 months. Koskinen was better in the first 3 months of the season. So I think it's all evening out, and if you have 2 goalies playing well with 15 games to go in the season, it's a heck of a lot better than having to ride one goalie every night when you're playing every second game because the other goalie can't stop anything, or he's a young goalie.
Now, we're referencing games against the Dallas Stars in Dallas. There's a home game the Oilers had against the Winnipeg Jets, in which arguably Winnipeg was the better team. They certainly had more shots than the Oilers, but the Oilers ended up winning that game. Would there ever be a concern, on the defensive side of the puck, giving up that many scoring chances to the opposition?
I'm sure there is. If you're an analytics person, you're giving up an awful lot of high danger shots. Goalies don't want to see those sort of shots over and over and over again, because usually they get beat up if you keep giving up shots between the face-off dots. The Oilers give up a lot of shots. I wouldn't say that they give up a lot of shots from areas that are 10 bellers. And certainly over the last while that has been the case. Not so much this year. And I think the key is on the power play. When the teams are having a power play, that's when your better chances is usually coming. And I think the Oilers' goaltending is the reason the Oilers' penalty killing is number 2 in the league, along with their checking ability. It's such a cliche, but they always say if your best penalty killer is your goalie, and if your goalies are making the saves and the penalty kill, you're winning games as well. And that falls to both Mike Smith and Koskinen. They've been very good when the other teams are getting power plays, and the Oilers' penalty killing is second to the San Jose Sharks.
There's still a few games to go before the playoffs start, but right now, if the playoffs were to start, the Oilers would be in a playoff spot. And these games that we've been seeing recently where Koskinen and Smith have been playing very well have been playoff-style games against opponents who would be teams they would face, the first round, but also, if they make it past the first round into the second round.
Well, I think they were certainly about as far away as you could find when you win a game 8-3 against a team like Nashville, where you score 5 goals in the third period, and then you go in and play the game the next night, and you have to scrape to get a 2-1 win in overtime. But the 2-1 game in overtime is probably going to be more like most playoff games, although certainly in the first round it's a bit of an outlier sometimes because the teams are so excited. Sometimes you get 4-3 games, 5-4 games. And the further you get in the playoffs, the games are a lot tighter and a lot lower scoring. I think a game like last night where the goalies play really well and the Oilers win the game 2-1 is what Dave Tippett wants his team to play like. It's a little difficult with Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, who create so many chances to have too many 2-1 games or 1-0 games. But I think he's trying to impress upon his team that that's the game they're going to have to play in the playoffs to win. And as long as the goaltending is as good as it's been, there's no reason why they can't win those sort of. The save percentage in the National Hockey League this year for goaltenders is down, lower than it's been. And in the case of Smith and Koskinen, certainly Koskinen's save percentage is .913, which is pretty high in today's NHL. And Mike Smith has now got it up to .905, I think, after a very rocky December. So they're making the saves when they should make them early in the games, and as the team gets better, they're making the saves later in the games to get your team to either overtime or win the hockey games.
And could this be even here we are late in the season, but things starting to click even for, particularly like Mike Smith, who's platooning with Koskinen. They've split it, pretty much 50-50, as you've said. Is this getting into a groove at the right time? I mean, I hate to even say the right time because every team goes through, ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys, even during the season and heading into the playoffs.
Well, you want both goalies playing well if you can. I think if the playoffs started tomorrow, I think Mike Smith would be the starting goaltender in the playoffs because his body of work in the last 2 months is better than Koskinen's. You need both goalies playing well, and with the Oilers playing every second game, you can't play the same goalie every game. So I think they need two goalies going. I think, and they've had a lot of back-to-backs the last while, so both goalies are getting a chance to play. If Koskinen gets his game back to where he's playing well and the team's also winning, I can see with, if they got a dozen games left to play, I can see both goalies playing 6 games. And then you get to the playoffs, and I would say Mike Smith has the edge right now in terms of who plays, but it's another one of those where there's not much difference. And if something happened to Mike, he had a bad game, he'd just play Koskinen in the other game, and I don't think there's any drop-off at all. And I don't think you can go into the playoffs just playing one goalie in case something happens and then say, oh, we haven't played this guy in 3 weeks, now we got to play him in the playoffs. So Koskinen will get lots of work, and Mike Smith in the last 15 games will as well.
Because in the playoffs, I mean, conventional wisdom is you got to go with one guy. They're not going to go back and forth between the two.
No, they're not. And the teams like Vegas with Fleury, but now Leonard's there, so that he's a great security net for Fleury to have Robin Leonard as the backup. But say if it's Winnipeg makes the playoffs, they've got Hellebuck and Hellebuck and Hellebuck. And Calgary, I'm sure they play Rittich more than Cam Talbot, but as long as you've got two, it complicates things a bit for the coach because he's not sure necessarily which guy to play. But it's probably no different than, say, Pittsburgh, where Matt Murray's won a couple of Stanley Cups, but Tristan Jarry's played better than Matt Murray this year. So they go into the playoffs, and what's the coach thinking? Should I go for the guy who's had a poor, not as good a year as the kid because he's won 2 cups, or do you go with Jarry, who's played much better? So as long as the goalies are fairly even, I think you start the guy who's the hottest at that time and then see where it goes from there.